I've spoken to FBI Director Mueller and Secretary of Homeland Security Napolitano, and they're mobilizing the appropriate resources to investigate and to respond. I've updated leaders of Congress in both parties, and we reaffirm that on days like this there are no Republicans or Democrats. We are Americans united in concern for our fellow citizens. I've also spoken with Governor Patrick and Mayor Menino and made it clear that they have every single federal resource necessary to care for the victims and counsel the families. And above all, I made clear to them that all Americans stand with the people of Boston. Boston police, firefighters, and first responders, as well as the National Guard, responded heroically and continue to do so as we speak. It's a reminder that so many Americans serve and sacrifice on our behalf every single day, without regard to their own safety, in dangerous and difficult circumstances. And we salute all those who assisted in responding so quickly and professionally to this tragedy. We still do not know who did this or why. And people shouldn't jump to conclusions before we have all the facts. But make no mistake, we will get to the bottom of this. And we will find out who did this. We'll find out why they did this. Any responsible individuals, any responsible groups will feel the full weight of justice. Today is a holiday in Massachusetts, Patriots' Day. It's a day that celebrates the free and fiercely independent spirit that this great American city of Boston has reflected from the earliest days of our nation. And it's a day that draws the world to Boston's streets in a spirit of friendly competition. Boston is a tough and resilient town, so are its people. I'm supremely confident that Bostonians will pull together, take care of each other, and move forward as one proud city, and as they do, the American people will be with them every single step of the way. You should anticipate that as we get more information, our teams will provide you briefings. We're still in the investigation stage at this point, but I just want to reiterate, we will find out who did this, and we will hold them accountable. Thank you very much.
President of the United States saying they do not know who's responsible here, but make no mistake, we will get to the bottom of this. Essentially, Mr. Chairman, Chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, back with us, saying the United States is resilient, and we'll find out who's behind this.
I think that's right, and I received a call from the White House about 30 minutes ago. We discussed this. Talked about the role of the federal law enforcement up in Boston, state and local. They're all working together. And I think, I made the same comment to the White House that the President just made, and that is today we are not Democrats, Republicans, we're all Americans. We're all Americans united against terrorism. And I think that's a very, very important point. And I think also, as he stated, not to jump to conclusions, because while I do believe this is an act of terrorism, we don't know who's behind it at this point in time, and we don't have all the evidence before us.
Sure. Someone who used to work for President Obama, a Justice Department spokesman, Matthew Miller, who worked for Attorney General Holder, tweeted today after all of this and after a number of minutes and hours had gone by, quote, "Small bombs in multiple locations sounds like the planned NYC subway bombing the FBI thwarted in 2009. Again, he was a spokesman for the DOJ under Attorney General Holder. Again, we're not jumping to conclusions, but it does sound like that kind of a plot.
It is very reminiscent of the Times Square bombing. And, the fact that it's Patriots' Day, I think has maybe some significance. As you and I were talking about earlier, there are reports, earlier reports, that there are ball bearings used in these explosive devices, which is very consistent with IEDs. This is a preferred method and route of choice for the terrorist to kill Americans. And so, again, it's very early stages in the investigation, but if indeed there turned out to be ball bearings, I would consider that a very significant factor in terms of this being a sort of IED device that's very similar to what the terrorists use overseas in the Middle East.
Who briefed Congress?
I just got a specific call from the White House liaison to me about 30 minutes ago.
And when was there shrapnel in both bombs?
They did not indicate that, but I have had some early reporting that there were shrapnel, ball bearings involved in these bombings. So, again, that's very significant when you look at the signature threat out here. The signature threat of an IED is ball bearings. So if that indeed was the case here, and we know 2 bombs went off, one was potentially self-detonated by the Coast Guard at the John F. Kennedy Library. If ball bearings were used, I think that's illustrative in terms of tracing back to the perpetrator and the motivation.
What about people? We've heard heightened security here in Washington and New York, you know, an abundance of caution. You're Homeland Security Chairman. You know, after something like this, obviously the nation is on alert.
We are. I don't want to, you know, I think it's important to remain calm and not panic. But D.C. and New York are on a little more heightened state of alert right now, as we should be, as is the White House and so is the Capitol. Remember 9/11, the 2 targets that were unfinished were the White House and the Capitol. So we're always very mindful of that, as is the fact that New York City is always one of the #1 targets. The fact that Boston was hit here just opens it up to a whole new city. And it's very, very tragic. But again, to pick a time when multiple people were going across the finish line to simultaneously detonate, as we've seen in these horrific pictures that we have, these graphic photos and videos of people literally being blown up, limbs being blown off. It is a real tragic day. And one thing is for certain, we will find the people who did this, and we will bring them to justice.
You know, it does run the spectrum, though. I mean, as much as it may have similarities to the New York City subway plot, you know, you also have images of the 1996 Olympic Park bombing and what that person, Eric Robert Rudolph, had in his mind. So you can run the gamut on possible suspects behind this, right?
Sure, and this is so close to the event that, you know, when I talk to law enforcement, FBI, those on the ground, you really can't jump to conclusions right now because you don't know what the final answer is here. But we do know that 2 bombs were detonated that caused mass injuries and 2 deaths so far reported. And the fact that the one at the JFK Library is of great concern. We don't have evidence that there are any more out there, but we really don't know at this point in time. It's just too early, right?
Last thing, you know, everyone's praising the local authorities on the ground. They apparently did find a couple of unexploded devices. They stopped the cellular use right away because cell phones could detonate some of these IEDs, for a better word, these bombs in many cases. They did a fantastic job, didn't they?
They did. And remember, just like on 9/11, going to the fire station across from Ground Zero, these first responders need to be commended. Look, it happened very quickly, but the response that they gave after the fact could have potentially saved more lives in terms of, as you mentioned, cell phones can detonate IEDs. If these were, in fact, IEDs, they could have stopped you know, further violence and killings. And I think they have done an extraordinary job.
Where do we go from here?
Well, there is a full investigation. Homeland Security folks on the ground, FBI, BATF, Coast Guard is in the waterways right now. We've talked to them. State and local officials, the local Boston PD is doing a phenomenal job, as are the firefighters. There are some indicators out there, although I can't confirm. There may be a person of interest. And I think this will evolve rather quickly.
I mean, we heard the police commissioner talk about, you know, the guarding rooms, and there's a heavy police presence. I mean, we have from multiple sources that, in fact, there is a person who's being guarded in the hospital. Very good sourcing from our guy over at Department of Justice. I mean, can you shed any more light on that?
Well, I'm hearing those same reports, but unconfirmed. And so it would be irresponsible for me to confirm something I don't know to be fact. But if that is true, that's very good news that we're already on to a person of interest that can lead us to what could have been a wider conspiracy plot to kill Americans on this tragic day, Patriots Day.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming over.
Brett, thanks for having me. Okay. Appreciate it.
Let's listen now to an eyewitness account of this horrible scene in Boston.
I was 50 yards from this thing. I saw the whole thing. We were coming down Boylston Street, and literally, I heard a cannon go off. I saw a whole bunch of smoke. I go, why would a cannon go off? Recognizing 4 hours or something. I thought it was bizarre. Then I saw the second one go off, and we immediately stopped.
You're running with a bunch of kids.
I'm with 5 of my kids. We were finishing together, and we all stepped dead in our tracks, and the police were just escorting us off. We didn't know what was really happening. It was terrifying. It was literally, and we saw a whole bunch of people running back the opposite way on Boylston Street back towards us, and we knew that this race was over.
Just one account there on the ground. Let's turn now to Charles Payne, the former chief of the Office of Bombing Prevention for the Department of Homeland Security. Charles, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Your thoughts on this day from your perspective, your knowledge, and your experience?
Brett, today, unfortunately, is a day that a lot of us knew was on the way for a long time. Much like the race where the devices were placed, it's been a marathon for a lot of the state and local first responders since 9/11. They've done a lot of training, they've done a lot of preparation, and all the law enforcement folks have been preparing for this for unfortunately too long. And so it's an important fact to realize that the folks that are out there know what they're doing, and it's a horrible, horrible day, but we will find who did it, and the abilities of the FBI and the folks of the Department of Homeland Security there's no better in the world.
Charles, what about the investigation from a forensic standpoint? What's going on right now?
Well, as anyone knows, and certainly I'm not on the inside of any investigation anymore, and if I were, I couldn't speak to an ongoing investigation.
No. Theoretically.
Right. Theoretically, right now, what the state and local law enforcement folks are doing is looking at every piece of available information, and at the same time, they have to ensure that all the citizens are safe and their officers are safe, and all the other first responders, firefighters, and emergency medical technicians, all those folks that are out there managing this incident, managing the consequences of this incident, are being kept safe as well by planning, by understanding who needs to do what next, and understanding what the priority in the investigation and the overall response is. So forensically, they're looking at every possible piece of information that they can, and they're very good at what they do. And they will have answers. They will have answers and answers that are double checked very soon.
Yeah, because how long would it take somebody to string together whether these bombs were made by the same bomb maker, or track back perhaps the specific materials used to make these bombs?
Well, Brett, it's tough to say because you know, as we used to say all the time, you know, an explosive device is up to the imagination of the bomber. It's also up to the situation that the bomber's in during the time he's preparing, and there are also always certainly probably signature items that anyone with a skill set might use more often than others. It's hard to speculate about that, and so the time that it takes to put one of these operations together, you wouldn't tend to think that it's short. But it's just difficult to understand the specific situation that the bomber was in, and his intentions as well. You know, until there's a complete search accomplished, and until all information is known, it's tough to make any speculations on really how long it took, how many there were, why he used what he did, and that sort of thing. The only thing that's for sure is we knew he intended to do some harm.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if we can get this video of the spot shadow of the two different bombs where you can see both of them in the same frame. But you can see one going off down the street, and then the other one about anywhere from 4 to 10 seconds later, depending on how fast the tape's going. Is it your sense that those bombs are timed to go off like that, or set off by a cell phone? Any sense to know how that would happen?
No, again, you know, tough to speculate. The simultaneity of the devices certainly lets you know that it was coordinated. The method by which anyone would coordinate those, again, is up to the imagination of the bomber. When you bring in the fact that perhaps cell phones were used, there are many different ways that a cell phone could be configured that could be used to initiate a device. But one thing is for certain, there was technology used, and there was an intention for simultaneity. So at this point, if you were an investigator or you were someone who was analyzing this incident, there's nothing there that can tell you to rule a lot of those things out, if that makes sense.
That was the video there. It's just down the street. You can see another puff of smoke. We'll try to get that spot shadowed there. I want to read something to you. One of the eyewitnesses says, just a really loud explosion, glass and smoke everywhere. We just ran. This is David O'Neill of Westboro. He says glass was blown out of a restaurant window, and then he checked his pockets and he found shotgun pellets, what he thought were shotgun pellets, in his coat pocket seconds later. And we just heard the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee saying ball bearings. When you hear that, what do you think?
Well, when I hear that, I know that from my training as well, now it's public knowledge, that things like that included in devices are there for lethality. If you were to take a look at the scene in Atlanta near where that device went off, there are still some pockmarks in some of the monuments in that area. So these devices are extremely powerful, and those sort of fragments, whether they're metal or nails or anything that are included around the device itself, absolutely increases the lethality, and one would tend to think that that would be the only reason that those would be present in a device such as that.
Do you think the administration has done a good job of preparing for something like this? You know, like you said at the beginning, that everyone knew it was coming. Do you think that we were prepared as a nation to deal with it? Obviously, the local folks on the ground responded tremendously. They stopped at least 2 other devices. But as a nation, do you think we were ready to go as far as dealing with something like this?
Well, Brett, I tell you, that's an extremely complicated question.
Yeah, maybe it's not a question for today. Right. And but I guess I just want to get your thoughts.
I will say that listen, improvised explosive devices have touched all of our lives since the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have watched our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines come back ravaged by the injuries that are caused by these devices. We, as a nation, have invested billions of dollars in countering them overseas. In the United States, we spend funding, we spend effort, and we lean toward an effective strategy to counter terrorist use of explosives within the United States, which often times goes beyond our borders in the inception of these attacks. So if you're asking if we as a nation are completely ready, first of all, I don't think you're ever ready for an incident like this. But today, of all days, is a day to remind everyone that it's not just the state and local first responders, it's not just the federal agents that are the counterterrorism, anti-terrorism folks out there. It's every citizen. If you see something, say something, and call the state and local law enforcement office. Because one of the things that we have done over the years is we have created a system where everything starts with the state and local law enforcement, and I can promise you it works. I've seen it myself. So are we prepared as we should be? The answer to that is probably never yes. Do we need to take a step back as a nation, take a step back as the federal agencies that are responsible to the president and to the people for protecting it, to say, have we done enough? Are we doing the right things? And can we do more? Those are questions that need to be asked in the coming days, and we should all hope that today, though unfortunate, doesn't lead to tomorrow and the next day.
Charles Payne, former chief of the Office of Bomb Prevention at the Department of Homeland Security. Charles, we really appreciate your time and expertise tonight on All Nights. Thank you.